This is a hibiscus plant and I was waiting for the flowers, and yes, most of them have bloomed, most of them are about to bloom. One such flower which had bloomed yesterday, now it has fallen off. So I think this can be used for our experiment. Experiment means to see what are the different parts of the flower. I hope it is possible for me to see, because already it has wrapped up itself. But don't worry, I have not used a live flower. I'm trying to use a dead flower instead. Maybe to prove that to perform experiments, it's not always necessary to use live flowers. We can wait for it to fall off and then we can use them. So let's see. The parts maybe can be shown very clearly now. Just a little difficulty with the petals, so I have to remove them one by one. Let's see if I can show it to you all. Okay. Well, so you can see that I have removed these petals separately because I already told you this was not a live flower. So as you see, this whole structure is actually the whole structure for pollination. Okay, if you see it a bit closer, you will be able to see that these parts over here, they are the anther, which is actually producing the male sex cells, or it's known as the pollen ones. Okay, these part. Let me mark it for you so that it will be easy. These parts. Okay, if you have a clearer view to this, you will be able to see that this is actually known as an anther. Alright, just let me have a writing. It's called the anthers. Okay, what are anthers? Anthers produce the male sex cells. The male sex cells means it produces the pollens. Alright, and these little parts which can be seen, these parts, if I just zoom it, you will be able to see that yes, these parts are known as the filament. These little portions are known as the filaments, and the whole total, that is the anther and the filament, they are totally known as the stamens. Okay, the stamen is actually the male part of the flower, and this long thing you can see which comes down, it's actually the stigma. Okay, the stigma collects the pollen grains and finally it comes here to the ovary part. Well, this is the ovary. Okay, it has actually been, here is actually the sepals which was there, the green part. So this is actually the ovary part. Okay, and inside the ovary we have the ovules. So let's start talking about the different parts of the plant which is help to for the fertilization process. Okay, this is the sepals. As you can see, the green part, it protects the unopened flowers. The green part which you can see, which actually holds the flower, it protects the flowers. As we move upwards, we see this is the ovary. The ovary contains the ovule. So what is the function of ovary? The ovary produces the female sex cells that is contained in the ovules. Right from the stigma, the pollen grains come and get stored over here, and this is a place where fertilization takes place. Okay? Yes. Now, as we start moving upwards, I already told you this is the ovary, and I will tell you what are the uses of ovary later. As we move upwards, we can see the stigma. Yes, this is a stigma which collects the pollen grains from here, and it just falls it. It's like a tubular structure. It throws it down here to the ovary. Okay. Now, talking about the filament, you can see these small things are called the filaments. These filaments, they hold the anther, and this is the anther finally, which are these little parts. Let me just bring it close. It will be much easy to understand. These anther, they contain the small structures of the pollen grains. Okay. Yes, it contains the pollen grains, fine pollen grains, where actually the insect sits and it gets brushed and all the pollen grains get into this place, and then it moves to another flower and then it fertilizes the whole thing. That is, the pollination takes place in this structure. Okay, now I will be discussing you everything over here. There are two types of pollination. Okay, now let me remove this part and let me tell you. there are two types of pollination. One pollination is actually the pollination by insects, and the other pollination is actually the pollination by wind. So pollination by insects, what happens, as you can see, these petals are very large, they are very brightly colored. And what is the reason for these bright color? To attract the insects. The insects will come. I hope you can understand that's a bee which is coming. So the insects come, they get attracted to this petals, and the pollen grains, they get stick to these anther. Okay, since the anther is always ready with the pollen grains, they get stuck over here. Now these pollen grains, they get stick, and they again move to another flower. Maybe it has come to another flower, and there the stigma, it's very sticky. If you just hold the stigma, it's very sticky. I actually personally call it as a sticky stigma. So the sticky stigma, it gets stuck to this pollen grains. That insect was flying around and it comes here. So this is a structure where the pollen grains, the pollination takes place with the help of insects. Now what happens where there are non-flowering plant? That means all these colorful and attractive things are not at all there. Yes, this is there, but not the attractive part. The petals are very, very small and they do not attract insects, so they are very base color, maybe green or brown, something like that. They do not have any nectar also which attracts the insects, because insect part is not required in this kind of pollination. Well, most of these pollen grains, they are not transferred to another flowers. The pollen grains over here, in this case you can see that the pollen grains are quite sticky and quite furry. But in the non-flowering plant, they are very smooth and light, they just stick out like this. And with the wind, as the wind will blow, then these pollen grains will just move like this, and the dust part of the pollen grains will just go away with the wind. That is the anther. The anther in that case is very loose, and it has got a very long filament which will release the pollen grains very, very easily. What happens in case of stigma of another flower? The stigma, or you can say the stigma of the same flower, it forms a network. They form a network like just you can see like this kind of a network which has been formed. In that case, they also form a network, and that network holds the pollen grains very easily from drifting. So this is what it's all about, the different kind of pollination by insects and also by wind. Last point, let me say, after the fertilization, this is a enlarged version of the ovary which I am showing, and there are small ovules inside this. After fertilization, what happens? All the leaves, all the petals and everything just fall off, and the female part, this part, it develops into the fruit. Okay, the female part develops into the fruits, and these ovules from the seed, and all the remaining portion of the ovary, they become the rest part of the fruit. So this is all about the pollination. Hope you have understood with my diagram and my life picture and all these flowers. Happy learning!